And good morning once again, my brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. I want to welcome you one more time to another Bible study together. Here we are in Acts chapter 27. And I want to thank you first for being here, but I want to ask you a question. You remember way back when we were in Acts chapter 23, Jesus talks to Paul. Jesus tells the Apostle Paul, "You have been a good witness for me here in Jerusalem, and you are going to go to Rome." Now, if God tells you you're going to Rome, I mean, wouldn't that just be great? You'd understand that that's going to happen. And in the modern age, wouldn't we think, well, God is about blessing me. All I have to do is name it and claim it. God is like this genie in the bottle. I just rub it and tell him what I want, and he does it because I claimed it and I had enough faith. And all these things people do today that are just completely unbiblical. Well, here we have Paul. I mean, what would you expect? God's going to send me to Rome. Does that mean the Norwegian cruise liner is going to pull up on the Eastern Mediterranean shore and pick him up, and he's going to be in first-class accommodations because he is blessed by God and fully favored and all the things that are told to us? No, what it means is, hey, Paul, you're going to be in prison for years. You're going to talk to Felix, the leader of the Roman guard in Caesarea. Then you're going to talk to Festus. Time is going to pass. Then you're going to talk to Agrippa. Nobody's going to come up with any reason for you to be charged. But when you appeal to Caesar, they're just going to punt. They're going to send you to Rome because they don't know what to do with you. There's no evidence for them to punish you, and yet your accusers continue to accuse you. So let's just get rid of you. All right, well, okay, now we're on the ship. What should happen to us now? Well, we should enjoy our first-class accommodations until we arrive in port, right? No, this voyage becomes a total disaster. I mean, literally. You remember from yesterday, we were starting off on this voyage, and things were going pretty well, but there was a season of time where no sailor in his right mind would find himself in the Mediterranean, and yet the delays and the time to sail had taken so long that by the time they get to Crete, they're entering into the dangerous season. They're entering into the winter time on the Mediterranean when these storms can come out of nowhere and potentially kill people. I mean, really, really serious. I would just want to take you back to the map and show you. There's that red line that goes across from right to left. That's the journey Paul takes to get to Rome. But I want to just zoom in on this part. That on the right of that circle is the island of Crete, and on the left you see Malta. In fact, let's just zoom in a little bit here. All right, do you see on the right where it says Fairhaven, and it talked about going on the leeward side of this little island called Cauda? All right, now what you need to see about this is as they're going, this huge storm pops up. You remember, right? It's just overwhelming. They don't know what to do. It's so intense. And in verse 17, we read, "Then fearing that they would run aground on the Syrtis." I think that's how you say it. Notice below there, at the bottom of the map, that word. This is a place where seagoing vessels go to die. The storms rage so strongly in the Mediterranean in this time of year that when they get blown off course, they end up in this North African shore where they become shipwrecks. All right, we read in verse 20 yesterday that they saw neither sun nor stars for many days, and no small tempest lay on us. All hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. They've given up all their tackle. They've given up all their goods. They're adrift. No sail, no nothing. But here's what's so amazing about this story. Yeah, the hardship is here. Paul is on board with, I think, like 267 people, and it looks like they might die. But what happens? I want you to think about this with me, church. What happens? Now you're adrift. The storm is raging. You have no navigational capacity because you haven't seen the stars for days. It's cloudy all the time. The wind is blowing outrageously strong. And what happens? Somehow your boat doesn't crash into the North African coast. Somehow your boat drifts on its own all the way to Malta. Are you serious? How does that happen? The storm hasn't stopped. But God, when all hope was lost, God came in and saved Paul, saved the voyage, accomplished his purpose when all odds would say, you're a shipwreck on the North African shore. God says, no, despite the wind, despite the fact that you don't have any sails, despite the fact that you don't have any tackle and equipment to steer the ship, despite the fact that you're just adrift in this huge storm, I'm going to get you to Malta. Wow. Well, on the way, Paul has a vision or a experience with the Lord. This very night there stood before me an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. We're about to see the shipwreck happen, but it doesn't happen on the northern shore of Africa. Instead, it happens on Malta, hundreds of miles away, against the wind, against all traditional storm strategy. They're not dying on the northern coast of Africa. They're going to be shipwrecked and not lose one. On Malta, the island well north of the northern shore of Africa. Okay, why? Because God has granted you all those who sail with you. You're going to go, Paul, and I'm going to make sure everybody on that ship is safe. So take heart, men. Paul is talking to the leaders of the ship, plus the crew, plus all those on board. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. God is in charge of our voyage. I serve him. He's told me what's going to happen. It's going to happen. Let's be a testimony to you about the power of God in this circumstance. Notice, instead of first class on the cruise liner all the way to Rome, Paul is in a terrible situation, life-threatening situation. The crew has given up. Everybody thinks they're going to die. And now God steps in and reveals himself to Paul, moves the ship to Malta, and does what? He testifies to his great power. There's no other explanation, and every sailor on that ship understands that something miraculous has happened. There is no other way we would end up in Malta. But we must run aground on some island. They're still out there. They don't see any land around them. Okay, God's showing me what's going to happen. We're going to run aground. When the 14th night had come, 2 weeks of this, as we were being driven across the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. How did they do that? I'm not sure. I'm not a sailor, but these experienced people understood that things were changing enough. It felt to them like land was near, so they took a sounding and found 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they took a sounding again and found 15 fathoms, and fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. This is it. We're going to die. God help us. Notice that this storm has brought people to their knees. Experienced, trained, well-positioned sailors are now on their knees before God, praying for day to come because they know what danger they're in. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship and had lowered the ship's boat into the sea under pretense of laying out anchors from the bow, okay, what's happening? This little boat in the back of the ship called the dinghy, they're trying to lower that down so they can secretly jump into it before this ship from the Alexandrian port that they're sailing on crashes into the rocks. They want to save themselves, in other words. It's a selfish move. They say, well, we're going to lay out anchors, but all the while they're planning on escaping. Paul said to the centurion, the Roman guard, and the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Notice this. the Apostle Paul has now become the leader of the crew, the Roman guard, of everybody. God has put him in a position where, because of his relationship with God, he has come to the top of the whole spectrum here, where he is telling the crew and the soldiers what's going to happen. You know, those who know God are blessed by God. Those who walk with him are sovereignly protected, in the sense that God is well aware of every circumstance and overseeing them. Paul is in the hand of God. Paul knows it. Paul rests on the promise that he's going to Rome. If he's going to go before Caesar in Rome, he must still be alive, right? So he has faith in God that God's going to see him through this impossible situation. But more than that, there's a great testimony to everybody else involved in this shipwreck. Why? Because they understand that this prisoner, this guy that's supposed to be going to trial in Rome, is the one they should listen to, because he knows God. Don't ever underestimate the power of God in your life as you face various trials and people around you are looking to you for what to say, how to pray, what to do. God moves like this. He creates a circumstance that is absolutely impossible, and then what happens? His power becomes on display, and nobody gets the credit for the miracle and for the outcome other than God, because nobody else can do it. So Paul says, look, don't let those guys get in that dinghy, or we can't save anybody. So the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it go. There you go, verse 32. We believe Paul. We're going to follow this prisoner's advice. Forget about what the captain has to say. Forget about what the sailors want to do. Paul, what do you think? You've prayed. You've heard from God. You tell us. You tell us to cut that boat away. Let's do it. It's gone. As day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day that you have continued in suspense, and without food haven't taken nothing. Now, I don't know if you've ever fasted for 14 days, but you're weak, you're hungry, you might even feel a little bit delirious, right? And not to mention that day and night for 14 days you've been on a ship that's just been catapulted by wave after wave through the dark of the night, through the cloudy day. You can't navigate. You're just completely tossed to the end of your rope. Paul says, look, before we run aground here, I want you to eat something. We have a little bit left. You need to take something. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will give you strength. For not a hair is to perish from your head of any of you. Wow. We're going to get as much strength as we can out of the food that we have left, and God is going to do the rest. Paul is bold. Paul is able to declare what's going to happen. And when he had said these things, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it, and he began to eat. Then they all were encouraged and ate some food themselves. Everybody's having the last bit of food available on this ship. And look what it says. We were in all 276. So I think I said 267 earlier. Sorry. We were in all 276 persons in the ship. God has promised Paul not one of these people will be lost. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. Everything now is gone. We're heading for the rocks. Now when it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on which they planned, if possible, to run the ship ashore. We're gonna aim for something over here, see if we can hit it. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea, at the same time loosening the ropes that tied the rudders. Then hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. We're trying to get through this terrible, terrible circumstance. But striking a reef, they ran the vessel aground. You know what it's like when the waves are pounding, when the surf is up? It's just relentless. You can't back up. You can't get the ship out of this position. Now you've hit the reef. Your ship is just going to break up as it's pounded by the sea. The bow stuck and remained immovable, and the stern was being broken up by the surf. Absolutely. the ocean is just unrelenting, and when it's angry, there's no salvation. You can have a huge ship and still encounter problems like this. So now they're not on shore. They didn't make it to the bay. The ship is being destroyed by the surf pounding into the back of the ship. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners lest any should swim away and escape. Okay, we need to kill everybody, because if we end up surviving this ordeal and they find out that the prisoners we're in charge of are on the loose because we were not able to retain them, it'll be our heads. So let's kill them. Let's kill them now, so that at least we might save ourselves if we are able to survive this. That's the strategy. But the centurion, again, this Roman guard who's in charge, wishing to save Paul. There's a little line there that you gotta just stick with for a second. Why would he have any allegiance to a prisoner? It doesn't happen. Wishing to save Paul. Apparently Paul over this journey has established some kind of relationship. Who knows if he's witnessed to this guy? Who knows what kind of a rapport they have together? But the Roman centurion is not going to let them kill Paul. He kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest on planks or on pieces of the ship. So it was that all were brought safely to land. So 276 people abandoned ship. The centurion doesn't let his guards kill the prisoners, and everybody ends up on the island of Malta. How do I know that? Well, we'll get to this again tomorrow, but after we were brought safely through, we then learned that the island was called Malta. How does God get Paul to Rome? It's an amazing story, but the thing you need to see is there's miracle after miracle after miracle. First, they don't go into the northern African coast and get destroyed in the graveyard of all the ships that hit these storms without warning and have no recourse. No, somehow, despite the fact that the storm continues to rage, they can no longer navigate, they end up being sent to Malta by the power of God. And then as the ship breaks apart, everybody survives. God is in control. When God is going to do something in your life, you just hold on to him and trust him, because everything he's planned is going to take place and nobody can stop him. So much to learn from this event. Read it again for yourself. Digest it. Just know that as you walk with Jesus Christ today, he's in total command. He's sovereignly in charge. Yield your life to him at every level and walk with him. You might encounter the storm, and your ship might break apart, and you might not understand how you're going to get to Rome, as it were in this case. But in the end, God's plan will be accomplished, because God's power overcomes any circumstance that can come our way. God bless you, church. Serve him well today.